Fishfinder, as well as a Canon 3-position rod holder, into a Perception Pescador 10 sit-on-top kayak. Hopefully this video will help you with your installation. First, let's take a look at the major components you'll need to complete the installation. First, you have the Garmin 140 Fishfinder, or whichever Fishfinder you've chosen to install into your kayak, and the associated hardware that comes in the box. An cello sponge that we'll use to mount the transponder in the hull of the kayak. Some type of sealant, and I've chosen to use Life Seal, or you could use boat goop, to seal any holes that we drill into the kayak. I've got a circular drill bit that will cut the hole that I will have to pull the transducer cabling through the hull of the kayak. We've got stainless steel nuts and bolts, and that will be dependent upon the type of kayak you're installing the Fishfinder into, as well as the type of Fishfinder that you have. A Sharpie pen, the Canon 3-position rod holder, a drill to drill the holes into the kayak, and additional drill bits. The next step in the process, and likely the most important, is to identify exactly where in the kayak you should mount both the Fishfinder and the rod mount holder. They should both be within easy reach while in a seated position, should not interfere with one another once installed, and also give you easy access in and out of the kayak. On the Perception Pescador 10 kayak, there are two pre-molded slots in the middle of the kayak for this purpose. I will be putting the rod mount holder in the top position and mounting the Fishfinder just below it. One other thing to take into consideration when choosing a position is to make sure you have access, if you're going to use nuts and bolts to secure the equipment, that you have access to put the nuts on the back side. I will have access through the front hatch. Now that we've chosen the exact placement of where we want to put our equipment, I'll give you an overview of the Fishfinder cabling. This is the transducer for the Fishfinder. It will be mounted against the hull inside of the front hatch. I'll go over the complete installation of the transducer later in this video, but I wanted to give you an idea of exactly why we are placing the equipment where we're placing it. In addition to the transducer cabling, this is also the power supply cabling for the Fishfinder. So all of this will be basically inside of the front hatch. And if you'll notice on this particular Fishfinder, there's a rather large receptacle that needs to come through the hull of the kayak. In order to make this as clean as possible, what I've decided to do is actually pull this receptacle up through the bottom of where the fish rod mount will be located. So in addition to the 4 holes that will drill to mount the fish rod holder, I'll also drill a large circular hole in the center that will pull the receptacle through, and then this cabling will come out the front or the back of the actual fish rod holder and plug into our Fishfinder. I will be using 1/4-inch stainless steel bolts to attach the fish rod holder. So use a 1/4-inch bit to drill your holes and you'll be good to go. After I drill each hole, I'll actually go ahead and put a screw bolt through to actually hold it in place while I drill the others. There's the last bolt. So now we have our base. Now we can take the cover off, clean up any shavings, and drill the circular hole in the center to pull our cabling for the transducer through. A quick and easy way to mark the center of where I actually need to drill my hole is to just use a straight edge and draw diagonally between the two. Where they intersect is actually where I need to drill my hole. I'll be using a 1 1/4-inch circular saw on a drill bit to drill this hole that we can pull our transducer through. There we go. Pull the plug out, and now our transducer cable should pull through. Now that we have our hole drilled, we'll need to make sure that it's large enough to fit the receptacle. Obviously in this case it is. So what we'll do is put the transducer and the power cabling inside the front hatch where it will eventually be stored. Take off this outer cover because it is actually much larger than the receptacle itself. And then we will run the cabling through the hole, and then we can put our cover back on so not to damage the connector, and test the fit of our rod mount holder. So basically, as you can see, these bolts will go back into the holes that we drilled earlier, and the cabling will come out the back, so you've got a nice neat fit. So what we need to do now is go ahead and put the top piece of our rod mount in place where it would typically be stored, to figure out exactly where we want to mount the Fishfinder. I've actually put in all of my rods, and the longest rod I have barely sticks out the bottom piece of the actual Fishfinder. So I'm going to want to move this up as close as possible to the Fishfinder without getting in the way. Once I find that spot, I will mark it, and then we will take the piece of the actual base that mounts to the kayak, and we can line it up and drill the holes for that. Okay, so now I've basically taken the fish rod holder out to give myself a little bit more room, and I need to mark the 3 holes that I need to drill for the Fishfinder mount. So you just line it up basically with the line that I had drawn earlier, and I'm going to mark these with a pencil because the Sharpie won't actually get all the way down in there. This will not be mounted flush with the kayak. There's actually going to be a little bit of a gap, so I'll have to use some washers to shim that and some additional sealant. And since this is closer to the water line, I've actually got 8 32nd screws or bolts, but I'm going to use a 5 32nd drill bit to actually do these. And what that will do is give it a little tighter fit. I'll still put the sealant on each of the bolts as I put those in, and I'll actually need to use a screwdriver to put these through to the other side. But looks like a good fit. Okay, now we can go ahead and put the fish holder back in its position, and then I've screwed the 3 screws in. They're not bolted on the back yet, but I wanted to at least go ahead and test it out to make sure it's a good fit. So I'll put the Fishfinder in, lock it down. Cable, of course, we'll need to adjust the length on it later, but in essence, that's what she'll look like whenever we're done. So now that we're sure that everything looks good and fits, we can go ahead and prepare to start putting the screws in with the sealant.